Hey there, welcome to Charting Toward Intimacy, where we're expanding the natural family planning conversation. I'm your host, Ellen Holloway. We are welcoming Megan Fowler to the podcast. Megan, I am so excited to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you, Ellen. I'm super excited to be here with you.
Awesome. And today we are going to be discussing a little bit of what Megan does, what her work is, and it's specifically tailored around, working your life around and into your cycle. And how you can really strategize that. And I'm so excited to talk about this because I think this is going to give you, everyone listening, an opportunity to just sit with this information and think about your life. How can you move some things around to make your life really fit better into your cycle and make things hopefully maybe a little easier for you or just less stressful. So Megan, can you start just by introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, my name is Megan Fowler. I live in Southern California. I've got 3 boys that I homeschool. And my journey into the NFP world began when my husband turned to me when we were dating and asked me what I thought about natural family planning. And I didn't know what he was asking. And so he gave me
awesome.
little details, right? And I was like, okay, this sounds interesting, but I need to know more. So I started researching and I was fascinated from the start, wow, this is crazy that I've menstruated for, I don't know, over 10 years. And I have never learned some of these basic facts about my body, my cycle, my fertility, options for family planning.
Yeah.
And so, I was just blown away. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to kind of loosely start tracking with the intention of eventually taking a class. I did eventually take a class. I did a symptothermal. I saw some things kind of off in my chart and I wanted to know more. And my instructors were wonderful, but they were brand new. And so they were like, it looks okay. And I'm like, I don't think so. So it was like, okay, I want to know what's going on. Why are my cycles kind of erratic? My cervical mucus was barely there. I really, really had to look hard for it. And I was checking regularly. And so I had heard about NAPRO and it kind of answered a question I had when I first started researching and understanding what the church taught about conception and, the issues with artificial conception. And so I was like, oh, there's this NAPRO thing out there. What's this all about? It sounds like it can really serve women really well in kind of investigating what's going on, the underlying issues with their health and their cycles. And so anyway, long story short, I ended up having an opportunity to go through a practitioner training, became a fertility care practitioner, and then went on to co-found Restore Fertility Care. So I worked with a lot of women and couples who had reproductive health issues. Many of them were suffering from infertility. And I did that for about 7 years. And then I started to notice, I was kind of diving into my own health and healing journey. And at some point I came across this idea of resting during menstruation. And that traditional Chinese medicine really recommends that. And I thought, that's really interesting. I guess it's worth trying. And so I started to try it. And for me, I felt like it was so helpful. I really appreciated it during that time, but I felt like it also made the rest of my cycle a little bit better. And so then I started tweaking other things, and then I dove into the research. And I always say I knew the power of natural family planning or fertility awareness to evaluate my health. I knew the power of it to plan my family, but I didn't really tap into how powerful our hormones are at impacting really almost every area of our lives as women, and how it's just constantly shifting. And so, I just had this kind of wow, this whole new level of awareness around it. And so now I help women, particularly entrepreneurial women or women who have some kind of control over their schedule, to help strategize, their work around their hormonal patterns so they can get more done in their highs and really create a little bit more space and rest in their lows. So yeah, that's what I do.
That is so cool. I love what you were kind of mentioning about like the superpowers of fertility awareness or NFP, the superpower of it to plan your family, the superpower of it to, help with health issues. But then also the superpower that is kind of, I feel like it's really bubbling to the surface now. People are really starting to talk about it. But the superpower of just really learning how the hormones affect our life and being able to help plan our lives a little bit better by doing things like resting during menstruation and other things. And that's what we're gonna talk about next. So Megan, you mentioned to me that you kind of have like a phase system that you've broken it out to, which is not quite the same as like what NFP methods define as their phases. Her phases are a little bit different. So let's dive into those phases and discuss those a little bit.
Yeah. So I think one of the key differences, and I come from a Creighton background, so we don't even call it we don't call it phases, right? We call it, pre-peak, post-peak. So I know that some of the methods do kind of break it down into phases. So
and some methods have 3 phases, some methods have 4. So it's always kind of confusing when someone's like, oh yeah, I'm in phase 3. And it's like, well, what does that mean? Do you mean you're like in ovulation? Or are you like at the end of your cycle? What do you mean?
Right. Yes. Yes. So I'm going to start with phase 1 because I think phase 1 is probably definitely different from any of the, different ways of thinking about the phases. And phase 1 is really your lowest hormonal point of the cycle. And this is when all of your hormones are just very low. Your estrogen, your progesterone, your testosterone, everything is just kind of plummeted. And this happens right before your new cycle starts. And so I have phase 1 actually starting about 2 days before you anticipate, your period beginning, and then going about 2 days into that next cycle. And that being really your time when your hormones are very, very low, very depressed. So that would be phase 1. And then
sorry to interrupt. So that phase 1, it ends before usually menstruation would end then. Is that what you're saying?
No. So it would go from 2 days before your period starts and then 2 days into the bleeding.
2 days into the bleeding.
Approximately. Yeah. And so about 4 days. So it's about 4 days of that really low time. Now I will say as soon as your period starts, you do have like a very small rise in estrogen, but it's still very low. It's like very minimal. So you might actually, some women have said, I feel better almost immediately as soon as the bleeding starts. And there could be other physiological reasons for that, but part of it could be that they are getting like these tiny micro doses of estrogen beginning to rise, but it doesn't really start. It's, more of steady ascent until a couple days into your cycle.
Right.
And I will say, just with all of this, every woman is unique, right? And so this is kind of like a basic framework, but if you have a really difficult premenstrual time, maybe your phase 1 is going to start earlier because you need it. You just need that time, and you need what we're going to talk about, happening more during that time, or maybe it goes a little further into your menses. But generally, in terms of the hormones, about 2 days prior to your cycle or period starting, and then 2 days into the bleeding would be phase 1.
And so this is something that you would this is very personalized. Again, like we said, these phases are not like based on, the scientific, when bleeding starts, that's the phase, blah, blah, blah. These are for, your own personal development and things like that. So it's something that you would be aware of. Like I'm thinking of a friend of mine, and I know she constantly, it's like day 2 of her cycle is just the roughest day. And so for her, that phase maybe would extend an additional day or 2, right?
Exactly.
Things like that. Okay, right. Great. I feel like I understand that better.
Yeah.
On to phase 2.
Yeah. So phase 2 is basically going to be around chart day 3. And that's standard, right, for every woman about chart day 3 until she enters her window of fertility. And what's happening in this phase is hormones are rising a bit, right? Kind of slowly, steadily rising, particularly estrogen. You have that slow, steady rise from, that chart day 3 until you enter your window of fertility. And then from there, you transition into what I call phase 3. And this is, your window of fertility when estrogen really takes off, right?
This is party time.
Exactly. And you also are going to get that dose of testosterone. So yeah. Do you want me to talk about like how those are going to make you feel? Or
yeah. Let's go to it.
Yeah. So estrogen is going to make you feel more optimistic, more energetic, generally speaking. And then in that like window of fertility, coupled with the testosterone, you kind of get like a boost of fearlessness or competitiveness. And also, if you think about what's happening biologically, our bodies in this time are designed to procreate, right? Like we are fertile.
Right.
And human nature is saying, okay, like, let's make new life. And so you're kind of like, oh, like, who's there? Like, who can I talk to? Who can I connect with? So it can be like a very like, externally focused time. And your language skills are actually peaking during this time. So, giving presentations, being in front of people, networking, that kind of thing will come up more easily. So this is kind of like it. Is often a high for women. It's not always. Some women will say, it's for me, it doesn't really feel so much like a high, but for many women, it's kind of like their high prime kind of external focus time.
Sure. Well, I've also heard like if a woman is experiencing like hormonal imbalances and she's not feeling that high during that, this defined phase 3, then that might be something to look into too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. And then phase 4.
Yeah. Phase 4. So after ovulation, as you transition out of your window of fertility, and this isn't a hard, fast day either. This is it could be maybe the day after ovulation or within those couple days after ovulation. You transition from phase 3 into phase 4. And phase 4, I mean, most of us know, right? You kind of, after that estrogen peak and ovulation happens, then you enter the progesterone dominant phase. And so you have the progesterone rising and kind of peaking, kind of like a slow, steady slope throughout phase 4 until your new cycle starts, or right before, when you kind of have that drop off. You also still have estrogen. It's not as high, but it hasn't like totally plummeted. It's still kind of there working for you. And I do think there's some testosterone, low levels of testosterone through this time. So I think of phase 4 as like, it's kind of like a nice, just kind of generally like kind of like a steady balance of feeling relatively well and kind of being able to you're not as externally focused. It's a little bit more internal. So you might kind of focus more on just like what's closer around you, right? Your immediate environment. And again, if you think about biologically, your body's saying like, oh, we could be pregnant. We may have conceived. How do we create safety in this time, to protect this potential new life and kind of solidify our current relationships, our current environment, our health, and kind of that kind of focus in this time. So then that kind of stays until things start to kind of hormones come down again. And right before the new cycle starts, you kind of get that low for phase 1.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
So, okay. So let's just go back through the phases. Now that we've kind of defined them a little bit, and you talked briefly on kind of what you're going to be trying to focus on during those times, but let's kind of go back through and just give some more examples of, how would a woman listening to this podcast, and, depending on the amount of flexibility she has with her schedule. Obviously, some of us have a lot of flexibility. Some of us are, have very demanding jobs and don't have a lot of flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
But what are things that we can move around and do? So starting
Yeah.
with that phase one, what's kind of the focus there?
Yeah. And before I dive into that, I just want to say that just having the awareness of where you
Yes.
are and what these things mean to you and how your body responds to these different phases and parts of your cycle can help mentally and emotionally to kind of recalibrate. It can help you in the way you're thinking about the expectations of yourself on those days. So even if you can't change anything, which I think we all have control over some aspects, there's still a lot of like benefits to be gained from paying attention, right, to what's going on and kind of tracking and beginning to that process of understanding your phases and how you experience them. That being said,
Absolutely.
starting with phase one. So I call phase one kind of like the rest and retreat phase. In terms of work, and whether this is work in the home, work outside the home, I really recommend, and I tell my clients, like, it's really important to start with rest, because that is something that a lot of us have trouble with, right? We haven't been taught to do this. We haven't been encouraged to do this. We've been encouraged to like keep going, be productive at the same level every day. And so I think it can be one of the most challenging things to do, but also one of the most beneficial, to start with a little bit of rest and space. And so in terms of your work, if you can avoid scheduling a lot of outside commitments so that you can work at your own pace, depending on how you're feeling, maybe you're feeling great and you want to connect or you want to do something great. It's not to be limiting, but often we're not feeling so great. And
Right.
we need to kind of, pick and choose, like, okay, what can I tackle and what feels good to me right now? And not like this major like push for something. So try to avoid scheduling outside commitments. And then you can kind of have like a list for work. What are some things I need to do, but that I generally find kind of light, kind of fun and enjoyable. And that's going to be different for every woman, depending on, her strengths and the things that she enjoys doing. So that's what I recommend for work. And then in terms of exercise, so you really want to take it easy, but we say like kind of like go slow, but keep moving if you can, because it really does help in so many ways to do like gentle movement, whether it's, a walk or stretching. But we're not primed to push physically during this time. But, even if you have like, some kind of premenstrual symptoms, or maybe even like, symptoms during your bleeding, your period, it can really help. Like if you do keep moving, like it can kind of alleviate some of those. So
Yeah.
that's what I recommend there. And then in terms of diet, I say to focus on really like nourishing foods during this time, warm, nourishing foods, things that are easy to digest, lots of, nutrients, maybe like soups, also iron rich foods, because a lot of women, we just tend to be iron deficient and we're losing a lot of blood. So if, if you eat red meat, you can eat, make sure to kind of focus on having a little bit more. If you do liver, you can do that because it's so high in iron.
I don't
Or
think
like
I've ever tried liver. I've heard so many good things about it, but I'm like, I don't know.
I know. I do. But so I get like a package of it, and then I have to like add it to like a ground beef and a small ratio.
I feel like I
I
could do
mean?
that. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah.
Like, do you add it to like when you make hamburgers or something?
Yeah. Yeah. Like a hamburger or a meatloaf, or, I mean, you could even do like, just like a spaghetti sauce with,
Oh,
if you,
sure.
and you chop it up small. It's not my most favorite thing to prep.
I feel like I need someone else to prep it for me
I
too.
know. Well, my husband's really sweet. Like he's prepped it for me, and I'm like, your ratio is not working for me. I'm sorry. He'll put way too much liver in. But what I just found? So we have a local farm near us, but I think they ship nationwide, called Primal Pastures, and they actually have a blend that is mostly ground beef, and it's got a little bit of liver, and it may even have some other organ meats.
Oh,
But it can really help. I noticed I was having headaches post menstrually. And when I started like eating the liver consistently during my period, I noticed they went away. And I can't say for sure, but like, I made a, a point,
It's a
like,
pretty
okay,
strong correlation.
pretty strong correlation. Yeah. And they do also have desiccated liver pills that are, you just swallow it and it's fine.
Yeah. That's a little easier
it's
to
a little
stomach.
easier. Yeah, literally. Right. So that's phase 1. And then moving into phase 2. So about chart day 3, you kind of come out of that, like, I need to kind of, hunker down phase. And you start to be like, okay, like, I'm ready for, life again. And so in terms of work, this is a great time to just like take a look at your cycle, set some goals, make some plans, commit to what you want to focus on in this time. And then in terms of movement, also, the rising estrogen is going to mean this is a time to start kind of getting back into more intense workouts. If that's something you do, you're primed in phases 2 and 3, really for resistance or strength training. So that's something that you can kind of slowly ease back into and kind of ramp up as you go, into phase 3. And then in terms of diet, this is a good time to try new things, new habits that you want to start. Your motivation and resolve is strong during phase 2 and phase 3. So if you're trying to, get into the habit of meal prepping more, or, try to add in, other food groups that you haven't been eating. This can be I don't know what that might be. This would be a good time that you could potentially try to do that.
Yeah. I love that. Okay. Before we move on, I want to pause on 2 things that you've mentioned here. One is like planning ahead. So a lot of times in our culture, and like, if you are a, planner person, you have like a paper planner or something, it's got this like monthly goal chart and you're supposed to do it on the first of the month. But like, if the first of the month is also the like first day of your new cycle, that's going to be a really rough day for you to just really think externally like that and plan out your month. And so I love this idea of waiting until you're in that next phase of your cycle and your brain is literally more primed to plan ahead. And so I just love that. And I personally would like to implement that in my own life. I can't right now, I'm pregnant, but
congratulations.
Oh, thanks. But yeah, I love the idea of finding a time to then do that, that goal setting or that planning out or whatever, more intentionally focused on when during your cycle you're actually primed to do that. So I love that. So, and then the other thing that I wanted to touch on was, you were talking about exercise and trying new things, or, working in your exercise plan. And something that I think happens a lot, and this is really similar to that planner issue. We're supposed to start planning our month at the beginning of the month, and that might not be a good time cycle wise for us. But with like an exercise plan, starting a new exercise plan at this time is a really great time because you're going to have that motivation to do it. And I love that. But then also like being aware, let's say last cycle, you started an exercise plan and maybe you started it in the middle of phase 3 or something like that. You don't have to start things on this time. And then if you miss it, you have to wait the next cycle. That's not how this is working. This is an awareness thing. So maybe you started a new workout plan. It was going really, really well. And then you hit the very end of your cycle or the beginning of your next, and you had to take a rest day. Having that awareness, I think, can really help our brains to get over the like failure mode that we put ourselves in sometimes when we do take a break from something like an exercise plan. And so I just love that. And I just wanted to kind of touch on that for just a minute to just remind yourself, like be good to yourself. Your cycle's a very good thing. We're trying to work within our cycle, and back to that phase 1, that rest is really important. And so I know personally for me, I think this is why I'm like standing on this pedestal right now. Personally for me, I've done this a million times. I've started an exercise routine and then likely right toward the end of my cycle or the beginning of my next cycle, I was feeling really crappy and needed to take a break. And I took a break, and then I just couldn't get back into it because I was just totally felt like a failure for skipping a day. But if we have that awareness, then we're not feeling like a failure. We're not skipping a day. We are intentionally resting and then beginning again when our body is primed for it.
I love that. And it brought an image to mind of like, you know, imagining and how we relate to that situation is like, one is like, okay, we're going along, we're steady, and then we just drop off, we just plummet, and now we've got to like mentally like work ourselves back to where we were, versus like, okay, we're going along steady, and then we just kind of skip over, right? Like we just kind of, you know, and then it's like, oh, here I am again, I'm good to go, right? It's very different. Yeah,
totally different mindset. It's not changing all that much. We were talking about, some women, we have a lot of flexibility. Some women, we don't have a lot of flexibility. This is something you absolutely can control, because it's about your mindset. It's about what are you thinking about when you are taking that break during that phase 1, and when you are beginning again during that phase 2. Lovely. I love that. Okay. Awesome.
Great. Okay. Yes. So into phase 3, right? So phase 3.
Oh, did we talk about food?
I think we did.
I think we did. I'm sorry.
2.
Yes, we did.
So for phase 2, it's basically, you're more likely to start new, even eating habits, or try new foods, or try new ways of, meal plating or anything like that.
Right.
And so as you move into phase 3 from phase 2, in terms of work, you are even more estrogen, feeling that estrogen, having that estrogen high, which is making you more optimistic, generally energetic, and then also kind of making you magnetic, right? Like you're communicating well. You want to talk to people. They want to talk to you because you're giving off that vibe. You actually look better during this phase. So if you have to schedule, photos or live videos, the estrogen clears your skin and makes your features more feminine. Yeah. So you're just generally feeling good, and you can kind of push and, kind of push yourself maybe out of your comfort zone. If you've got a certain goal in mind or something you've kind of been hesitant about, this is a good time to kind of go for it, because of everything working for you. And then in terms of exercise, so you still are going to really be able to do resistance, strength training really well, even more so. You can get even more intense. One thing to be aware of is the increased estrogen will make you slightly more injury prone. So you want to protect, just be aware of that. Just be really careful. And then in terms of food during this phase, this is a time when, because we're primed to be like looking for a mate and connecting with people, and we're kind of like out and about, we are not as focused on food and eating. And are actually, I think our caloric needs are actually a little bit lower, especially than they will be at the end of the cycle, right? Post ovulation. But one thing to be aware of is, you might be someone who tends to just like forget to eat because it's not like front of your mind. Your body's not telling you, okay, make sure, like, make something. I'm hungry. I want some carbs or some salt or whatever. So you want to be aware that it's good to have things on fast, like things to grab on hand, because you're not going to be as motivated to cook and prep it and take more time to get it, but you need it. You still need to eat, and you don't want, right? Like we don't want our blood sugar just like plummeting, because that's not good. That's going to kind of make our high not so high. So be aware of that. And then as you transition from phase 3 into phase 4 in terms of work, this is a time where you kind of shift from like the external focus to, again, the more immediate, internal like focus. So it's a good time to do deep work. It's a good time to finish things up. Anything you've kind of committed to at the beginning of the cycle, you kind of have the focus and just the ability to kind of like, okay, sit down and finish this thing up. Let's see, in terms of one thing that's good during this time, phase 4, about 5 days post ovulation, they've said is a really great time to make decisions, like difficult decisions, like things you maybe been putting off, because you have a really nice balance of estrogen and progesterone. So it's like the optimistic with the pessimistic or realistic, however you want to frame that. So it's a good time to just kind of like wrap things up, like get that decision off your plate, get that project off your plate, finalize something, and to set you up to kind of move into that phase one with a little bit more of like peace as you kind of retreat or take some rest time, to know that things have been kind of taken care of. And not everything's going to get done, but focus on, a few key things. And then in terms of food, we are going to be craving like all the things: carb, salt, fat, sugar, and our hormones really need it during this time. Again, our body says like, hey, we might be pregnant. Like, let's put on some extra, right? Like some extra nutrients and some fat stores here. So that's something to be aware of, that you're going to crave those things. And, you can make sure to have things that also make your body feel good, right? And
right. Like, chocolate versus like berries and fruit. Like, there's a big difference there.
Exactly. Like a lot of processed carbs that are really sugary versus like, sweet potatoes or, like other things like that. Just like having those things on hand, to support you during that time. So you're not depriving yourself, but you're also not like, why do I feel awful? And I'm going into, my premenstrual time feeling extra like bloated or just not great. So in terms of workouts, so this is the time and through phase one where you might not be feeling very motivated. So phase four, like our motivation to exercise sort of plummets. It can for some women. But this is actually still a good time to keep moving. They said it's a great time for fat burning. So cardio is kind of optimized during this window. So my recommendation to women is like, give it 5 or 10 minutes and see how it feels, because you might be surprised. Like, even though you're not feeling super motivated to start working out, you might start and feel like, yeah, like actually this is really good.
Oh my gosh. I've had that happen to me so many times. I'm so curious now thinking about all these things. I'm like, wow, I feel like I recognize these different emotions and these different things. I'm like, I wonder if these were happening during these specific, times in my cycle. Like, I've had that happen so many times where I like step into a workout class and I'm like, I do not want to be here. And then 5 minutes in, 10 minutes in, I'm like, I feel great. And at the end of the workout, I'm like, yes, I'm so glad that I did that.
Yes. Yeah, I know. And, once you start paying attention, I bet you'll find some of these things do line up. I mean, some, right.
Yeah.
Inevitably won't, but, I've had people reach out and say like, wow, like with the not eating during phase 3, someone's like, yes, like I didn't know I did this, but I'm realizing now I totally do.
Oh my gosh.
And right.
Yeah, I'm thinking that too, because I'm the type of person who does totally forget to eat. Like, thank goodness I have a toddler and I have to feed her on a pretty regular schedule, because that focus helps me remember to eat.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I love that. I just want to go back really quick before we kind of wrap up, in just going back to that goal setting. So you're in phase 2, you've set a goal, you move into phase 3, you're like surging with energy. It's such a perfect time to then go do said goal, and you've got a lot of motivation to do it. And then you've got a nice period of time where you're going to have that energy, you're going to be doing that goal. But then being aware of the fact that you will hit a lower point. And so like, being able to go into that then phase 4, knowing, okay, I set this goal. I've been really good about this goal, whether it's an eating goal, it's an exercise goal, it's a work goal, whatever it is. And so being aware, like, I want to continue this. And so, maybe pushing yourself a little bit to continue that goal, or taking it down a notch. Maybe you had a goal of going for a 45-minute walk every day. When you get to that phase 4, maybe you just go for a 15-minute walk, but you're keeping up that goal and you're still going for it, so that you really can create it into, just a normal part of your day. If that's the type of goal you're trying to assess.
Absolutely. I think that's so well said.
Awesome. Megan, thank you so much. This was so much good info. Like, I feel like I'm personally going to come back to this episode and just like listen to it a few times and just get more ideas all the time. So I hope that that's the same case for a lot of our listeners. Was there anything else you wanted to mention before we close out?
No, I think that's about it. Just I think a little goes a long way. You don't have to try to optimize every area at once. It's just
Good
like,
point.
just start, kind of paying attention, tuning in, and kind of, maybe choose one area. And then I think even the mindset piece and the awareness goes a long way. So I just want to encourage listeners there. And then I do have a free download on my website that you can get. When you opt in, you get like the work part laid out for you, so you can kind of reference that. And then I think later, like in the email sequence, a couple weeks, and you will also get the work, the eating, and the exercise. So
Awesome.
if you're interested in just having, a hard copy of something to refer to, then that's there for you at thealigncycle.com. So,
Perfect.
yeah.
And that link is going to be in the show notes and also Megan's Instagram link as well. So you can follow her and just she puts out great info on her Instagram page, which is fun. And on that, thank you so much, Megan, for being here. This was so much fun to chat with you.
Thank you for having me, Ellen.
Thanks so much for listening. Again, check out the show notes for links to connect with Megan and learn more about what she does and putting your life together with your cycle. If you are not already following us on Instagram, be sure to check out our Instagram page at Charting Toward Intimacy. And if you ever have any questions, comments, or episode topic ideas, definitely reach out to me. My email is in the show notes, and you can reach out on Instagram. Until next time.